The Faraway Horses by Buck Brannaman is a book that will tear your heart right open. I don't know if that's the best way to say it, but there are parts of this book that will make you cry so deeply. You know, when you're reading about what he had to go through and what his brother had to go through as a child. But it's also a book about redemption, because if you don't know who Buck Brannaman is, there's a documentary made about him called Buck, B-U-C-K, and also he was very involved in the book and the movie The Horse Whisperer, which I'm a very, very much big fan of. But what I'm a fan of, even more of his horsemanship, is how he was able to create such a beautiful and successful life for himself, particularly because what he went through in childhood. And it's something that I could very much relate to because of what I went through in my own childhood. And like I always say with these book reviews, I don't give you a summary of a book. I don't want to ruin it for you. I don't want to tell you the story. But like the phoenix, this man rose out of the ashes to build some life for himself. And also, it's really interesting because the horses, you know, he not only created redemption for himself, but also for the horses that he worked with, because the majority of horses that this man worked with, besides starting colts, were horses that were really damaged early on in his life, which he was damaged really early on in his life. And there's so much gold, there's so much wisdom in this book that, you know, all the books I read, I like to read them over and over. I don't like to just read one book and then put it away. I like to read it many times because you go so deeply into it. And there's a couple things. Let me read you something, just an excerpt from this book. It's from early on in this book, just to talk a little bit about his childhood. When she dropped us off at school, I'd tell her how scared I was to be home alone with Dad. I was afraid of doing something wrong. I was afraid of getting whipped. Not symbolic whipping, like a real whooping. One time his dad tied him and his brother to a fence and whipped them with a bullwhip. I would beg her not to leave me, and every day she would cry. And, you know, I feel like I had this relationship with my aunt. My dad died when I was 2. My mother died when I was 11. But my mother God bless her, she had a lot of, she was an alcoholic, and she didn't make the best decisions. And my aunt, who adopted me when I was 11, I would always cry when I would have to leave my aunt and go home to my mother when she was still alive, because of what I would be subjected to. So I always say that, you know, my aunt was like an angel to me in my childhood, and she, man, trust me, my aunt was not an angel in life, and you know, she was human and had her own issues. But as a young child, to me, man, I don't think I'd be the man I am today without. It's the only source of love I had in childhood. And I think for Buck, his mother was the only source of love he had. But eventually his mother would die, and he would be adopted by these people. And he would grow up on a ranch, and eventually would realize his dream of becoming a cowboy. But let me read you some more. The cults. So he you know, he's talking about this a cult, right? So the occults don't start out by let me just explain what he's trying to say. So like when he starts cults, he's saying that they don't start out, you know, liking or looking at human beings like the way they look at their own mother, but they can. Now this is key. They can if the human offers support and not just affection. So, having my own children now, I have to be honest, man. I think that sometimes I'm successful in spite of my childhood, and not because of it. And not that the adults were like evil in my life, but they really didn't understand the premise of going all in on their kids. And now that I'm a father, my purpose in life is to do everything I can. I give my kids a ton of affection, but my purpose in life is to support my children in attaining their dreams, giving them the support. They're gonna have to put the work in, man. But I'm gonna give them all the support I can, so they can get where they need to go. And I felt like the generation I grew up in, for the most part, the adults really fell short in that. They did not understand that. And the way I look at it is, man, why are you gonna? Well, I feel like the world is so different now compared to maybe why people have kids. But if you're not gonna go all in on your kids, why have kids? I understand that. Look, life isn't perfect, and people end up having kids. People have kids outside of marriage, and maybe it's a difficult situation. But I really feel that people get a lot further in life, and not just with materialistic successful things, but they get further in life as human beings when they have the support. We have to ask ourselves the question, what kind of world do we want to create here? And if you have kids, I think you're so involved in making the world, you don't realize how involved you are when you have kids, because those kids are going to become adult, and you don't understand. We don't know the gravity of the mark that they're going to leave on the world. And so, how is this relatable to horses? Well, I see it all the time in my work because I work with horses, and so I'm a chiropractor, and I kind of give that head shake a little bit, because chiropractic is one of the most misunderstood healthcare professions there are. And I've heard that Mr. Buck Brannaman, I've heard his opinions about chiropractic, but I don't know how he feels about chiropractic, because he's never told me. Now, his sister-in-law was actually my first horsemanship instructor, and I have the honor of adjusting, a lot of her horses. But I even had more of an honor for me to learn horsemanship from her and spend those years on her ranch, learning from her and learning from her husband. And actually, I'll put a link, but if you go on my website, there's a video about horses on my website. I'll leave a link to my website. And he tells a story about a horse of his named Abe that I was able to help out with my work as a chiropractor. And that's what I do now. I still adjust some people, but my specialty is horses. And almost every day of my life, I work with horses through my means as a chiropractor. And I'll do a video explaining what chiropractic is. It's so misunderstood, and it gets it's gotten a bad rap through the years, and maybe rightly so, for the way some chiropractors have gone about chiropractic. And look, there's excellence in everything, and there's bad in everything. I mean, when I was a kid, I had two lawyers that really betrayed my trust. And now, one of my closest friends is a lawyer, and he's one of the best lawyers I've ever met. I mean, he practices on a level of excellence. He's like phenomenal as a lawyer. And I did my best, and every day I work hard to bring that excellence. Not only is my work as a chiropractor, but in my love and training of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which I've been doing that for over 20 years, and I have my black belt in that. But chiropractic's really misunderstood, and you listen to the way people about it, they use the word treatment, or they use the word manipulation. In chiropractic, we don't manipulate, we adjust. There's a big difference in that. And if you could simply pull out a dictionary and look at the difference in the definition between adjust and manipulation. I don't manipulate as a chiropractor. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is manipulation. In Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you manipulate the structure, the biomechanical and the neuromechanical structure of your training partner, of your opponent, God forbid, your attacker, to reduce their function to the point that they quit, or there's some type of break or dislocation. But if you don't know what Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is, look it up, man. It's an amazing martial art. It's become a wonderful sport that you can learn and compete in. It's my favorite sport is wrestling. It's very similar to wrestling. I grew up wrestling my whole life. It was my first love. But I've been doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for over 20 years, and I train at least 5 days a week. And I teach now a lot here on my farm. But it's so similar, you know. In Jiu-Jitsu, you develop a feel, and working with horses, you develop a feel. And that's really what horsemanship, well, I'm not, you know, I shouldn't say I'm an expert in horsemanship, because I'm not. I'm an expert in chiropractic, whatever expert means these days. For me, I feel that word expert is garbage. You know, I feel like God needs to save us from a lot of the experts. But I want to keep what I call a beginner's mind. I've never gotten to a place where I've said, I know enough about chiropractic, I know enough about horses, I know enough about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. You know, there's no ceiling on these things. There's no ceiling on learning in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. There's no ceiling on learning as a chiropractor. There's definitely no ceiling on learning about horses. I'll go as far as says I don't know anything about horses, and I'm still amazed that they let me do what I do. I'll eventually post some videos of me adjusting some horses, and I used to post a lot more, but since I've gotten married and I have a family, I'm a little more private than I used to be, and I just feel now more comfortable starting to open up. But you know, let's go back to the book. Let me read you something else. There's so many passages in this book that pop out at me, and I want to share some things to you. And you know, in something that I've learned in horsemanship, adjusting horses, is that if the horse doesn't trust you as the leader, they're not going to trust you to adjust them. And you know, this saying, the first time I heard this saying was from my first horseman instructor, Mindy. But Buck Brannaman says it in his book. It says you got to make the wrong thing difficult and the right thing easy. And also, think about this is profound, right? Give them a vision of the future so the past becomes irrelevant. And man, I'm telling you, like, if you have trouble with your past, what you need is a vision for your future. And the more you can, you know, I feel like everyone has a vision for their life in their hearts that God planted in there. The highest path that you can take. Thy will, not your will. And it's in there, man. And I talk about this in I think a little bit in the last video about, like, and I'm actually writing about it now. I've been writing about it for a while, that if you don't carry out that vision in your heart, most likely everything that can go wrong will go wrong. You know, life has a way of pushing you to carry out that vision that God planted in your heart. And it's like you get these little impulses, you get these pushes. And I really feel like in life you have three choices. You can quit, you can do nothing, or you can get better in any situation. And I feel doing nothing, just shutting down to the experience of life, man, that's like the worst thing you could do. If you don't like something, quit. And you'll if you weren't supposed to quit, you'll come to regret it. You'll carry that regret with you most likely for the rest of your life, unless you have, man, you're fortunate enough to have another vision in your heart, receive another vision in your heart that can make the past irrelevant. And if you ever get a chance to just go, maybe, you know, if you have nothing to do with horses, but if you ever have a chance just to go and audit, which means just sit and watch Buck Brannaman Clinic, man, I encourage you to do so, because when you watch this man ride a horse, you know, I used to say this about Mindy, I can watch her ride a horse for hours, because you're watching, you know, she would melt into the horse. I've seen Buck, I've audited his clinics. Sadly, I wish I was able to have the honor to meet him personally. And I've been to a ranch that one of his good friends owned called, excuse me, McGinnis Meadows Ranch. I want to really talk about that place in a minute, but when you watch Buck or Mindy ride a horse and they melt into that horse, you're watching excellence. You have an opportunity to observe excellence, and that's rare. And I feel the same way when I watch Lucas Lepre. That's who gave me my black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, or Gordon Ryan. When you have a chance to watch them train or compete or even drill technique, man, you have an opportunity to see excellence. And in one of my favorite movies, Vision Quest, which is about wrestling, one of the characters in it is telling a story about how he was watching Pele, the famous soccer player from Brazil, score a goal, and he said he just broke down crying because, man, let me see, when you see that excellence, it will bring you to tears. It really will. And those are the moments in life that inspire you to keep moving forward. That's what gives you hope in your heart, to bring out the courage in you to carry out that vision you have in your heart. You have a vision in your heart. Everyone has a vision in their heart. I know it in my soul that's the truth. No one is born without that opportunity to receive that vision in their heart, no matter how rough their upbringing, their start was. Mr. Brannaman, he had a tough start. Me and my sisters, man, we had an extremely tough start being in this world without parents. Being in this world without parents, man, you're thrown to the wolves, and it's tough. But here's the key. The key is to never become a victim. The key is to never agree, no matter what has happened to you in the past. The key is to never agree to be a victim. The only way you become a victim is when you agree to it, because there were parts early on in my life where I agreed to victimhood, because you know what I got? I got something out of it. I got attention and I got pity. The downside of it is catastrophic. I gave away all my power. For what? For pity. And it took a long time to realize that the things, the tragedies that occurred in my life and the difficulties that happened to me, the terrible things that happened to me, I can actually turn into gold. That alchemical process from lead to gold. I can use them, but I had to give up victimhood. I had to give up victimhood. And I had to allow myself to feel all the pain that I went through, to be able to let go of it. And man, there's a wonderful book about that called Letting Go, The Pathway of Surrender. I'm going to definitely review that book. And when I do that review, I'm going to talk about the Vipassana meditation retreats and all the years of psychological therapy. Man, I had an honor to be, man, I had some great therapists, and I had one of the best mentors in my life for years. I want to talk about him one day. But when you read these books, even though I don't know Buck Brannaman personally, he becomes like a mentor. The more you read the book, the more you're actually getting to spend time with him. That's why I encourage you to read this book, but don't just read it once. Read it many times. Read it many times, and he'll become like a mentor to you. And anyone who has been through tremendous tragedy in their life and who has overcome and who has not agreed to victimhood, man, they have something profound to share, because they become successful in life in spite of their life. And that is so key, man. That is so key. And I really feel the more trouble you've had, the more tragedy you've had, the bigger life you can have. I really believe that. I look at my own life and I see that. I look at my sister's life, and I look at someone like Buck Brannaman, who had the life he had. Man, I know people like this. I've met people like this, and they're profound, because man, they've been down in the hole. They've been down in the darkness, and they didn't stay there though. They didn't stay there. They had the courage. But you'll hear throughout this whole book how Buck, over and over again, he has these coincidences that show up in his life, and who does he thank? He thanks God. And when you thank God, you know what you do? You put your ego on the sideline, and you agree that there is a higher power outside of your own intellect and ego. That, man, the belief in God is so powerful, because you're taking the reins away from your ego and you're handing them over to a higher power. And I mean, if the 12-step tradition didn't prove this, nothing will. I mean, the 12-step program, decidedly unscientific, has been the only thing successful to be able to alleviate addictions in Alcoholics Anonymous. Before a 12-step program came along, man, addiction was an incurable, hopeless disease. And man, nothing has been more successful in dealing with that than the 12-step program. It just blows me away. But before I go, let me read you a couple more little excerpts from this book. And hey, I want to talk about something. This is pretty amazing, because I experienced this a lot, especially in New York City when I was first starting out, and then again when I was first starting out adjusting horses. You know, people thinking it was nonsense, but this is something that happened to him. However, I've never forgotten the big time rodeo producer made on me. I'm messing up a little bit here. So he met this rodeo producer at this event, and the guy like spilt a drink on his pictures and everything. And he goes, "I'll never forget the impression that the big time rodeo producer made on me. He wouldn't give me his time because he didn't figure I could do anything for him." Man, I can't tell you how many people I met like this in New York City who wouldn't give me the time of day because they thought I couldn't do anything for them. Or same thing when I first started working with horses. And I've proved a lot of people wrong. In that, especially with horses, because, you know, a lot of people say, oh, chiropractic is placebo. And man, let me tell you, infants, yes, I've adjusted a lot of infants, and I'll do a video on chiropractic. You may think that's bizarre, but that's just because you don't understand what chiropractic is, and that's fine. That's fine that you don't understand chiropractic. You're not born into this life understanding everything. Actually, we're born into this life understanding nothing and knowing nothing whatsoever. But, you know, there's a lot of ignorance around chiropractic. But, you know, they say that chiropractic is a placebo. Placebo is interesting because if you were to define placebo as your mind being so powerful that it can overcome sickness or disease but by belief alone, I would agree with you. Your mind is that powerful, but I've never met anyone that has completely mastered their mind. Regardless, going back to what I said here is that, you know, he was just starting out. This guy wouldn't give him the time of day. Man, I've been there. I've been there many times. So now that he's successful, I'm successful as well. I do my best, like he said in the book, that to try to treat everyone equally with that same respect. That's such a critical lesson to learn in life. But, you know, you meet those people who, if they figure you can't do anything for them, they won't give you the time of the day. And man, I feel bad for those people. So, you know, something about having a rough upbringing is that it takes a while to not attract the wrong people into your life. And especially for me, man, let me tell you, I feel like I dated all the wrong women. I feel like the only good relationship I've had with a woman in my life is with my wife. Because, you know, if you have a rough life, you don't have that guidance, you don't have a father to teach you, you don't have a mother to teach you, how are you supposed to get it right? You know, you're flying blind, you know? And he gets into some trouble. He was married once, and this is a little bit about the woman he married, right? So he says, she didn't really apologize. This girl was, you know, liked him and his best friend. They eventually would have a falling out, but she didn't really apologize. She liked both of us and felt kind of torn. She didn't want to hurt either of us, which is kind of weak. But his friend says to him, any woman who allows two men to fight over both is playing both ends against the middle, and she isn't very good for either. And man, that actually happened to me in high school. I had a really good friend. me and him were good friends, and the same girl liked both of us, and that was the end of that. And like I said, I never saw what a good marriage looked like. I have a great marriage, and we work at it. We work at it very hard. My wife and I love each other very much, but man, I never saw what a good marriage is. It's like this life, is there's so much ignorance. There's so much ignorance. We know so little. Sometimes I think we don't know anything. We're just finding our way through to the best of our ability. One more thing. So, he talks about leadership a lot, right? And this was beautiful. Listen to this, man. This not only relates to horses, this really relates to kids, because I experienced this a lot in my youth. And it goes back to what I was saying in the beginning about supporting your children in the vision they have for themselves in their heart. So there's no crime in saying no, but always saying no will take away the horse's desire to try, and pretty soon the horse or the youngster will believe there's nothing he can do right. Think about that. Your kids get into messes, but if you're always saying no to them, no, and you don't give them an alternative, you don't say, okay, listen, you can't do that, okay? But you can do this instead. I do that with my son all the time. I say, hey, look, hold on. You can't do that. You can't break that. So I got an idea. Why don't we play with this toy instead? There's this guy, his name is Dan Pena. You can find him on YouTube. He's got videos on YouTube. And this guy was a billionaire. I think he lives in a castle. I think it's in Scotland. But anyway, someone asked him once why he's so successful. And he said, because I had a father who disciplined me, and I had a mother who never told me no. Think about that. She never told him no. She always guided him instead. She didn't just shut him down. She guided him into things. Man, my wife is so good at this. And I learn from her so much about parenting. She was a nanny for a long time, but man, you can't do that to kids. And you can, and if you do, and then if you do that to kids, and this is what I always found bizarre about the adults, is that they never really gave the support that they could have for the dreams and visions we had in our hearts as children, talking about me and my cousins. But then after a certain age, they expected us to have it all together and be successful at whatever we did. And for a while, I had a lot of resentment at them, but then I started to think about how were they raised? So the past lingers in the present. It just gets passed on from generation to generation. And something that my wife and I really agreed to is that we're gonna stop those patterns and cycles. And our whole marriage, we love each other, but our marriage is about the family. Our marriage is about our children and helping our children achieve the best of what is best in them. And in an odd way, working with horses, I believe, has helped me be a better parent, because, man, horses require a lot of patience and a lot of presence and a lot of understanding, because with horses, bullying children, man, it's not the way. You're gonna create a wreck. So thanks for tuning in. Listen, if you like these videos, hit the like button and share it with people, and subscribe to the channel. I enjoy doing it, man. I enjoy talking about the books that I read. Truthfully, that's why I do it. I just like to talk about the books that I read and what they mean to me. And I don't know if you get something out of it. I just feel like maybe some people could get something out of it, and that's why I do it. So thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next week.